pitfalls, recoveries, and how to start tomorrow. This is a teacher's confession. She had been listening to a podcast about concept based inquiry on her drive to school for 2 weeks. She was inspired. She decided to try it on her year 6 class on a Wednesday afternoon. The unit was on simple machines. She prepared a concept attainment sort. She put pulleys and levers and inclined planes on yes cards. She put a hammer and a saw and a pair of scissors on no cards. She walked into class. She placed the cards on the floor. She stood back. She waited. For about 40 seconds, the children sat in silence. Then they started talking. They asked her what the cards were. She said, "Tell me what you notice. Tell me what they have in common." They looked at the cards. They looked at each other. One child said, "These are tools." Another said, "These are also tools." A third child said, "I do not know what I am supposed to do." A fourth child asked if they could just have the worksheet now. A fifth child started crying because the boy next to her took her favorite card. Within 4 minutes, the class had fallen apart. The teacher gave them the worksheet. She went home that night and cried in her car for 10 minutes before she went inside. She told her partner that she was never trying that again. I want you to hear this story before we go any further, because this is exactly what is supposed to happen the first time. Not because you're a bad teacher, not because the children are wrong, not because the method does not work. It is exactly what is supposed to happen because you're doing something new, and new things go wrong before they go right. The teacher in the story did not understand the 8 common pitfalls. She walked straight into half of them on her first attempt. Within a year, she was running concept based inquiry every week, and her class was unrecognizable. Not because she was talented, because she learned the pitfalls. Let me name them for you. Each pitfall is paired with a recovery. The recovery is short, the recovery is concrete, the recovery is something you can do without redesigning anything. Once we are through all 8, I'm going to give you the 5 smallest moves you can make tomorrow morning to begin. Pitfall 1: concepts that are too vague or too many. The first pitfall is the most common. The teacher reads about concept based inquiry, gets excited, and decides their next unit will explore systems, change, interdependence, perspective, identity, and conflict. 6 concepts in one unit. Each one is enormous. Each one is barely glimpsed. The unit ends. The children remember almost nothing because their attention was scattered across too many ideas. I once observed a grade 4 unit titled Stuff in the Environment. The unit map listed 12 different concepts. The teacher was proud of how comprehensive it was. I asked one of the children at the end of the term what they had learned. She said, "We did the environment. There were a lot of words." That was honest. That was also the result of the pitfall. The recovery is short. Pick one concept. One, maybe 2 if the unit is long. Pick the single generalization that, if a student remembered nothing else, would be worth remembering. Lose the others. Yes, lose them. The temptation to include is the death of depth. The brave move is to subtract. A teacher who teaches one concept deeply in a unit is doing more for their students than a teacher who waves at 6 concepts shallowly. Pick one, commit to it. Let the unit revolve around that one concept like a planet around the sun. Pitfall 2: inquiry that turns into Google and make a poster. The second pitfall happens when the teacher releases the children into inquiry without anchoring the inquiry to the concept. The children open their laptops. They search. They find images. They paste the images onto a slide deck. They write a paragraph next to each image. They present. The presentation looks polished. It is colorful. It uses transitions. It is conceptually empty. I once sat through a grade 7 group's 6-minute presentation on the rainforest. Stunning photographs. 3 paragraphs from Wikipedia. A fact about a tree frog. At the end, I asked, how does what you just showed us help us understand interdependence. The room went quiet. They had no answer. They had not been thinking about interdependence. They had been thinking about rainforests. The recovery is to make every product earn its concept. Before the product is considered done, it has to answer one question. How is this an example of the concept? If the student cannot answer it, the product is not done. A poster that does not point back to the generalization is wallpaper. Make the concept the standard. Hold the standard. Pitfall 3. Treating concepts like vocabulary words. The third pitfall is subtle. The teacher decides to teach concept-based inquiry. They write interdependence on the board in big letters. They explain what the word means. They ask the students to copy the definition into their notebooks. They quiz the students on the definition the following Friday. The students do well on the quiz. The teacher feels successful. But something has gone wrong. What has gone wrong is that the concept has been turned into a vocabulary word. The students know the word interdependence. They cannot use the concept to think with. They cannot see interdependence in their own breakfast that morning, in the news, in their friendships, in the math problem in front of them. The lens has not become a lens. It has become a label. The recovery is to move the concept out of the unit. Ask the students again and again, where else have you seen this? Where else in your life? Where else in the news this week? Where else in another class this term? The concept must travel. If it does not travel, it has not been understood. A useful test of whether a student really understands a concept is to ask them to find it somewhere far from where they learned it. The grade 6 student who learned about interdependence in a unit on rainforests and can then explain how their classroom community is also a system of interdependence has understood the concept. The student who can only define the word has memorized it. Pitfall 4. Assessment only on content recall. The fourth pitfall is the one most teachers slip back into without noticing. They design beautiful inquiry experiences. They build the concept wall. They guide the students to the generalization. Then, when it comes time for the end of unit test, they default to what they have always done. List the parts, define the term, match the diagram to the label. The test only measures what the students remember about the topic. The test never measures whether the students can use the concept. When this happens, two things go wrong. The first is that the actual learning the students did, which lives at the conceptual level, is invisible to the assessment. The second, and worse, is that the students learn over time that what gets tested is what matters. If only content recall gets tested, only content recall gets prioritized by the students for the next unit. The whole CBI architecture collapses backward into a content-heavy classroom. The recovery has a name. It is sometimes called a GRASP's task: goal, role, audience, situation, product, standards. In plain language, every assessment must include at least one item that asks the student to apply the generalization to a context they have never seen before, the novel context test. If the student has only ever studied the French Revolution and the exam question is also about the French Revolution, you have measured memory. If the question describes a recent protest in a country the student has never studied and asks them to apply the generalization about inequality and change, you have measured understanding. Build at least one novel context question into every test. The students will rise to the test you build. Pitfall 5. The teacher talking too much. The fifth pitfall is so common that almost every teacher who tries CBI falls into it. The teacher sets up a beautiful provocation. The students start to respond. The teacher gets nervous. The teacher starts explaining. Within 90 seconds, the teacher has narrated the puzzle, hinted at the answer, told the students what they should be noticing, and closed the cognitive gap that was supposed to do the teaching. The lesson is over before the students did any of the work. A useful self-check mentioned in earlier chapters, is to ask yourself silently during a lesson, who is doing the thinking right now? If the answer is me, the teacher, stop. Hand the thinking back. Ask a question instead. Let a student finish someone else's sentence. Sit down. Let the room work. Install a physical habit in yourself. Some teachers count silently to 7 before responding. Some teachers ask a colleague to tally teacher talk versus student talk for one lesson. Whatever method you use, the goal is the same. Make yourself uncomfortable with your own voice. The teacher who talks less teaches more. Pitfall 6. Skipping the reflection because the bell rings. The sixth pitfall is logistical, not philosophical. The lesson runs long. The investigation gets interesting. The students are still arguing about the case study at the 45-minute mark. The teacher thinks, I will skip the reflection. There is no time. We will pick it up next class. Then they never pick it up. The reflection becomes the thing that always falls off the end. The phase that creates metacognition, that converts the experience into a memory, that transfers the learning out of the lesson and into the student, is the phase that gets dropped. A pattern emerges. Over a term, students remember less and less of the unit. Teachers cannot understand why. The investigations were vivid, the discussions were good, but nothing stuck. Nothing stuck because nothing was reflected on. Reflection is where the cementing happens. The recovery is to protect the last 3 minutes ruthlessly. Set a timer. When it beeps, no matter where you are, you stop. You ask one reflection question. What did you understand today that you did not understand at the start of class? Or where else might this idea show up in your life? 2 minutes to write, 1 minute for 2 students to share. That is it. You will lose some content. You will gain durable learning. It is a trade you should make every time. Pitfall 7. Trying to redesign the whole curriculum at once. The seventh pitfall traps the most committed teachers. The teacher finishes a course or reads a book on CBI. They are inspired. They go home and start rewriting all 6 of their units for the year. They draft new generalizations. They sketch new provocations. They redesign every assessment. By week 3, they are exhausted. By week 6, they have abandoned the project and gone back to the textbook. They feel like CBI failed them. CBI did not fail them. They tried to do too much, too fast, in too many places. The brain that wants everything at once gets nothing. The recovery is the principle of one. Start with one unit. Inside that unit, pick one concept. Inside that concept, run 2 phases properly. Maybe provocation and concept attainment in the first week. Maybe generalization and transfer in the second. Build slowly. Notice what works. Adjust. The teacher who does this for 1 unit per term, who deepens it across 2 years, becomes a CBI teacher. The teacher who tries to do everything in October burns out by November. This is also true at the school level. A whole school does not become CBI in a year. It becomes CBI across 3 to 5 years. Schools that try to flip overnight fail. Schools that move one team at a time, one unit at a time, one practice at a time, are still doing it well a decade later. Patience is the form ambition takes when it knows the size of the work. Pitfall 8. Adopting CBI as a brand instead of a practice. The 8th pitfall is the saddest one. It happens at the school level more than the classroom level. A school decides to become a concept-based inquiry school. They put it in the mission statement. They print posters. They have a launch event. The newsletter has a special edition. The website is updated. From the outside, the school looks like a CBI school. From the inside, nothing has changed. You walk into a classroom. The teacher is at the front. The teacher is explaining. The students are taking notes. The poster on the wall says inquiry-driven learning, but the lesson is the same lesson it was 5 years ago. The brand has arrived. The practice has not. This can persist for years. Parents are told the school is CBI. Inspectors are told the school is CBI. But the actual teaching has not shifted. The recovery is honest. Walk into one classroom, watch one lesson, ask the one question we keep returning to: who is doing the thinking right now? If the answer is the teacher, the brand has not arrived. The arrival of CBI is not a logo or a poster. It is the moment when a child is generating the meaning and the teacher is standing quietly to one side. Everything else is decoration. If you want to know whether your school has actually adopted CBI, do not look at the website. Look in one classroom. Sit at the back. The walls will tell you how to start tomorrow. We have just spent a long stretch of this chapter on what goes wrong. Now I want to spend the rest of it on how to start. Specifically, how to start tomorrow. Not in 3 months, not after a course, not after your school commits. Tomorrow. The 5 moves I am about to describe are small. They are doable. Each one takes less than 10 minutes of planning. Each one will change something visible in your next lesson. You do not need to redesign anything. You only need to add. Here are the 5 moves. The first is to add one concept and one conceptual question to a lesson you already teach. The second is to end your lesson with a sentence stem. The third is to try one concept attainment sort. The fourth is to replace your warm-up question with a provocation. The fifth is to build a concept wall. 5 moves. Let me walk you through each one. Move 1. Add one concept and one conceptual question. Take a lesson you already teach this week. Open the lesson plan. Look at the top of the page. Below the topic, write one line in a different color pen. Write concept, GEK. Fill in the blank with one concept that sits underneath the topic. Use the 2 moves from chapter 3 if you need to find it. The why ladder, the example of game. Now, below that, write one more line. Write conceptual question, Tajariik. Fill in the blank with a question that opens the concept up. Not a closed factual question, a real one. A question whose answer is not on the next slide. If your lesson is on photosynthesis, the concept might be interdependence. The question might be, how do plants and the rest of life on this planet depend on each other? If your lesson is on fractions, the concept might be equivalence. The question might be, when do 2 different looking things mean the same thing? If your lesson is on a poem, the concept might be voice. The question might be, whose voice are we hearing and how do we know? Write the concept and the question on the board in your next class. In a different color, let the students see them. Let them sit there throughout the lesson. Refer back to them. Does what we just did help us answer our concept question? That is it. You have added concept-based inquiry to a lesson you are going to teach anyway. It cost you 4 minutes of planning. Move 2. End your lesson with a sentence. Stem. The second move is even smaller. At the end of your next lesson, do not finish with a recap. Do not finish with a homework reminder. Finish with one sentence stem on the board. The stem reads, today I learned that atom because cock. Give the students 2 minutes to complete the sentence on a sticky note. Make them write the whole sentence, not just 1 or 2 words. Have them stick the note on the board on the out. Read the notes on your prep period. You will be astonished. Half of the notes will tell you what the children genuinely learned. The other half will tell you what they thought you wanted them to say. Both are useful. The first half tells you your teaching worked. The second half tells you they were guessing. Either way, you now know. This move costs you 90 seconds of class time and 10 minutes of reading. It is the cheapest piece of formative assessment available in education. It also begins to train the children in metacognition. They start to expect that they will be asked at the end of every lesson what they learned. Over time, they start to listen differently during the lesson because they know the question is coming. Move 3. Try one concept, attainment, sort. The third move asks a little more of you. but only a little. Pick one vocabulary word in a unit you are about to teach. Just one. Maybe it is metaphor, maybe it is ratio, maybe it is revolution. Pick a word you would normally define on the board. Now do the opposite. Make 6 cards. 3 of them are clear, yes examples of the concept. 3 of them are clear, no examples. Bring the cards into class. Show the 3 yes cards on one side of the board. Show the 3 no cards on the other side. Say, Bhito, all of these on this side belong together. None of these on this side belong with them. Why? Wait. Do not name the concept. Wait. Let the students start arguing. Let them be wrong. Let them be confused. Let them notice. Eventually, somebody will get close. Somebody will say, they are all comparisons that pretend to be true. Somebody will say, they are all numbers compared to other numbers. Somebody will say, they are all like sudden changes in who is in charge. Whatever the concept is, the students will find it. When they do, you give them the word. Now they have a word for a thing they have already understood. The word lands. This takes one prep period to set up the first time. After that, you will reuse the same set of cards for years. Concept attainment is one of the most efficient moves in education. Run it once. You will use it forever. Move 4. Replace your warm-up with a provocation. The 4th move asks you to change the first 3 minutes of class. Most teachers open with a warm-up question. Recap what we learned yesterday. What is the formula we covered last lesson? Define metaphor. These warm-ups are safe. They are also dull. They are also a missed opportunity. Replace your warm-up with a provocation, a discrepant event, a mystery image, a paradoxical claim, a short clip, a surprising number on the board, a single piece of art on the screen with no caption, something that wakes the room up. If you teach science, drop a heavy object and a light object at the same time, the way the grade 10 teacher did in chapter 6. If you teach history, put a single redacted telegram on the screen and ask the students to work out what it is responding to. If you teach English, put 2 paragraphs side by side and ask which one is more trustworthy and why. If you teach maths, write the number 42 on the board and ask the class to write the questions whose answer is 42. If you teach art, project 2 paintings and ask which one is the garden you would walk through and which one is the garden you would sit and look at. If you teach early years, hold up 2 objects, a feather and a rock, and ask which one wants to be friends. Any of these will work. They cost you the same amount of class time as the old warm-up. They cost you slightly more in preparation. They cost you nothing in energy because you will not be the one talking. The students will be talking. You will be standing back, breathing, listening. Move 5. Build a concept wall. The 5th move is the one that compounds across the term. Pick one concept for the next week, just one. Write it in big letters on a sheet of poster paper. Stick the paper on a wall in your classroom. Title the wall, "Where do we see this?" Give every student a stack of small sticky notes. Tell them their job this week is to find examples of the concept in class, at home, in the news, in another lesson, on the bus. Whenever they see one, they write it on a sticky note and put it on the wall. No marks, no grades, no requirements, just an open invitation. Watch what happens. By the end of the week, the wall will be covered. Some examples will be brilliant, some will be off. That is fine. You will use the off examples to teach. You will say, is this one really an example? Why or why not? The concept becomes a living thing in the room. The students start hunting for it on their own time. The hunt is the learning. After a week, you can swap the concept. The next week, the wall holds a new concept. By the end of the term, the wall has held 6 concepts, and the room has been hunting for big ideas every single day. That is a CBI classroom. You built it with sticky notes. A teacher who started with Move. Well, let me tell you about a year 5 teacher in a school I worked with. She was new to CBI. She was overwhelmed by the books and the courses and the words. She told me she did not have time for any of it. I asked her to do one thing, just move one. Add one concept and one conceptual question to a lesson she was already teaching the next day. She was teaching a lesson on the water cycle. She wrote on the board in red marker, concept systems. Then below it, conceptual question. What happens when one part of a system stops working? That was her entire investment. 4 minutes of planning, 2 minutes of class time. At the end of the lesson, a child put her hand up. The child said, "Miss, my mom has diabetes and her sugar system does not work properly. Is that the same kind of thing?" The teacher told me she stood there with her mouth open. The water cycle had become a way of thinking about a child's mother. Systems had walked out of the lesson and into a kitchen across town. She added a sentence stem the next week. By half term, she was running concept attainment sorts. By the end of the year, she had built a concept wall and was running provocations as warm-ups. By the second year, she was redesigning her units around generalizations. She told me she did not redesign anything. She just kept adding. The redesign happened by accumulation. That is how it works. You do not jump. You add one move. You see it work. You add another. The next book in your hand is the one your students will write. An action-oriented takeaway. Pick one of the 5 moves. Just one. Do it in your next lesson. Do not pick the hardest. Pick the one that is closest to what you would have done anyway. If you already write an objective on the board, add the concept and the conceptual question. That is move 1. If you already do a wrap-up at the end, replace it with the sentence stem. That is move 2. If you already define vocabulary, try a concept attainment sort instead. That is move 3. You do not need permission. You do not need a program. You do not need a course. You do not need new resources. You do not need a curriculum overhaul. You need 10 minutes of preparation and the willingness to be uncomfortable for 5 minutes in your next class. Tomorrow, not next term, tomorrow. The students in front of you tomorrow morning are the ones who deserve this. The lesson plan on your desk is the one you can adjust tonight. The 4 minutes of planning is the only thing standing between you and the version of teaching you have been imagining for a while now. Do not redesign your year. Just add one move. The rest will follow. The recap and what comes next. Here is what we have said. Concept-based inquiry has 8 common pitfalls, and almost every teacher who tries it falls into at least 3 of them. Too many concepts. Inquiry that becomes a poster. Treating concepts like vocabulary. Assessment only on recall. Teacher talking too much. Skipping reflection. Redesigning everything at once. Adopting CBI as a brand. Each pitfall has a recovery. None of the recoveries requires a complete overhaul. The 5 moves you can make tomorrow are small. Add a concept and a conceptual question. End with a sentence stem. Try one concept attainment sort. Replace your warm-up with a provocation. Build a concept wall. Pick one. Start tomorrow. In the final chapter, we will lift our eyes from the classroom and look at the school. What does it take to build a culture of concept-based inquiry across a whole staff, across a whole school, across years? How do leaders lead this kind of change? How do we support diverse learners? How do we keep the work going when the first wave of enthusiasm fades? The last chapter of this book is the closing chapter. It is also a benediction. It is the chapter for the teachers, the leaders, and the dreamers who have walked with us this far. We will end together.